1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Talk about the blues and the bebop connection and the desire to look into that phenomenon, and that happens to be one of my very favorite subjects. I've been spending my whole life trying to live in that world, and so I thought I would just take this opportunity to maybe throw something together for you that might help you in that direction. Now, first of all, you may know many of these things already, but there's a few little things that can really help create this blues/bebop vocabulary in a blues situation. And the main thing is to play something interesting based on the chords when there's an arrival point. So, we play a blues idea, and then switch to the 4 chord. Back to 1 chord. Now, right here in bar 4, there's a preparatory bar before the arrival of the 4 chord in bar 5. So what you can do in that bar, and this is really important because it's these bars that are preparatory for an arrival that are the most valuable and important. So we can play what I call a 2-5 of 4. So if the 4 chord is my temporary destination, I'm going to play F minor 7 to B flat 7 before it in bar 4. Instead of just another bar of the 1 chord, I'm going to play F minor 7 to B flat 7 to 4. Just sets it up a little bit. And you can play ideas based on the chord there. So here's an idea based off of F minor, and then B flat 7, and then I resolve it to there. So that might sound like this. Bar 2, 3, here we go. Right? And it sounds a little dopey right now because I'm kind of doing it that way. You can always move into that first root of that F minor chord from a half step below. Right? And then you can also do other types of things with that basic framework. You can play rhythmically. Right? Always just aiming for an arrival point of a chord tone of E flat 7. Any of those type of things. You can also, if you want, in that moment, take it up an octave, like we'll do that same type of thing here. Right? And then there's two things that in bebop language happen frequently is arpeggio up, scale down. That would sound like this. Right? So that was a scale down of a chromatic scale. So I played up the arpeggio, and then I just went chromatically down to the 5th degree of my 4 chord. Now that scale down can be chromatic like that. There's a lot of different possibilities. You just have to land it, really. Chromaticism is great. All you have to do is land. That's the whole deal. You can play everything chromatically for an hour if you want, as long as you land eventually on that chord tone. Or you can play the diatonic scale of B flat 7. Okay, and among other possibilities, if you're here, the closest turnaround point is this D. But it doesn't have to be D. It can be really, you could play, that's a nice one, chromatically down from here. Or to the root. Okay, so 2-5-0-4. Now, as a substitute for that, you can also play 2 flat 2 of 4, meaning going chromatically down from F minor to E7 to to E flat 7. And that one might sound something like this. Okay, as a simple idea, I played F minor arpeggio, F minor 7, and then I played off the 3rd degree of E9. And then I resolved either down or up. Either way, if you're in the middle, you can go either way. And that note lands me on the downbeat of bar 5. Okay, so there's one more I can show you. It's playing B minor to E7 or E9 to E flat. Or, right, it's just a simple B minor arpeggio, and then that same arpeggio off the 3rd of an E9 to resolve. Okay, those are 3 possibilities which we can apply to all of the other situations that I'm going to talk about, except for this next one. In bar 5, we get to the 4 chord. Then in bar 6, very often there's a sharp 4 diminished chord. In this case, it's E diminished, right? So that might sound like this. 2, bar 3. Here's my little approach. There's bar 5. Here's bar 6, diminished, and then 1, 6. And we'll continue from there in a moment. Now, the thing about that diminished chord is, obviously you can play a diminished arpeggio there. Better than a diminished scale. We don't really have enough time in the blues vernacular to play a scale. I don't like the sound of scales anyway, so I like the sound of an arpeggio. But the real beauty of this is that when you change from E flat 7 to E diminished, you notice that only one note is changing in the chord. The E flat becomes an E. Everything else stays the same. So that means if your line contains primarily chord tones or minor pentatonic type lines that you might play over the 4 chord, when the diminished chord comes, all you need to do is change the E flat to an E. So let's say I've got something like this. And I just went. So it's a lot easier than thinking of a whole new thing to just say, oh, I got to just make sure my line contains that E now, just for the brief moment that it may occur. So if you say, that was just a straight arpeggio of E flat, up a half step with the root, and then continue on back to the B flat. And then we get to the 6th chord, G7 sharp 9 or a flat 9. Not usually G9, but G7 sharp 9. I always just play that kind of a sound there. D flat 7th arpeggio works very nicely as well. And that leads us to, oh, by the way, on that G7, there are other ramifications. Some people might like to hear a C harmonic minor scale type idea there. Again, back to the scale thing, I tend to think more about G7 and put a bluesy melody over the top of it. Then we get to this lovely 2 chord, which is C minor. And the same type of strategies we used in 2-5-4 can now be used as 2-5 of the 1 chord. I tend to go down the arpeggio, and then maybe up the F7, and then approach the 3rd of the next chord. You could play up the arpeggio, all right, And then the last little bit is usually 1, 6, 2, 5. So that's all the same stuff again. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the time feel, because sometimes the messages play a triplet feel, where you play the first note of a triplet and the third note of a triplet. So you have this long, short sound, or something along those lines. I think sometimes the bounciness can get, it's a little binary. So if we feel the beat 1, 2, 3, 4, then we divide that beat into these two long, short feeling things. 1, 2, 3, 4, pop, da 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 da. It can be a little bouncy, a little up and down this way. And I think that jazz swing kind of feels a little bit more like a swaying back and forth rather than a bouncing up and down. Hopefully that's not distracting of a metaphor. So what I find helpful is to dry your swing eighths out a little bit. So not so much this. Although I will slip into that sometimes if I want to kind of create an old-timey feeling. One way you can do this is by feeling the pulse as 1 and 3, and then feeling like you're playing 16th notes on a slower tempo, because then it's not such a binary. The pulses are receiving 4 notes per pulse. So 1, 3, 1, 3. So you get a little bit longer arc in terms of the time feel. And then the other thing is that if you're a binary and you're playing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then you want to play a triplet, you have to craft that binary thing into a triplet, and it's more difficult. But if you have a longer flow, it's a little easier to lay those triplets in there because you're not trying to cut a 2 into a 3 as much. So then you have this whole vocabulary of okay. And if you have an arpeggio that has 4 notes, one very tried and true way to get it to be a little more interesting is by making it a long note followed by a triplet. That kind of sound. When you're adding the triplets into your vocabulary, what you're going to want to do, you want to put in these ornaments and the triplet-based things. It's a little easier to do that and keep the flow going and keep it smooth when you're feeling 1 and 3. A lot of times people say feel 2 and 4, and I think that's sort of almost become standard operating procedure. It just occurs to me that feeling 1 and 3 helps to smooth the line out. It may be that you have to have done 2 and 4 to become solid on that. I'm not sure about that. I have a couple of ideas about it that I won't go into now. And then the ornamentation that we really expect to hear that lends itself to a bebop vocabulary is this sort of... Okay, so we've got the expanded harmonic vocabulary. We've got that dried out eighth note swing, slightly drier than doop-de-doop-de-doop-de-doo, and added triplets at feeling 1 and 3, or relaxing the pulse away from 1, 2, 3, 4, feeling maybe if you only feel the 1, you know. So let that pulse relax so that your lines aren't so binary, so that the down and up aren't binary. That allows for a lot of, ornaments and flow. Okay? And let's see, is there anything else? Don't be afraid to just play blues, because it always sounds great, you know what I mean? So a lot of times guys learn about this stuff, then they want to put it everywhere, and it's maybe a little too much. So then you want to take out some of that fancier stuff and just play some blues, and then use it on a turnaround, or use it on that arrival to 4, just so that it becomes and remains special, instead of having it be at every twist and turn you've got some sort of advanced harmonic concept. All right, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful. Take care, guys.